You okay, sir? The young waitress asked softly, voice carrying that kind of practiced warmth you only hear in diners before 9 a.m. Her hand steadied the pot as she refilled his chipped mug like it was just another table, just another customer. But the veteran's hand froze midway to the sugar packet. His eyes didn't follow the coffee. They dropped instead, straight to the object resting just above her apron. A single silver dog tag. It swung ever so slightly as she leaned forward, catching the morning light. One name. One blood type. 1 year. A blood type he knew. Not from a hospital. From the jungle. From November. From a damp, burning field where things ended badly and too fast. Because 54 years ago, he had held the man who wore that tag, watched the blood drain from his chest like ink through cotton. He had whispered the last words into his friend's ear, and then sat in silence until the medevac finally came. Blood types aren't the kind of things you forget. Not when you've written them on boots, helmets, and the inside of your soul. The diner sat just off Highway 41, sandwiched between a long-dead gas station and a tire shop whose best days died with rotary phones. Inside, the linoleum tile curled at the corners, yellowed and cracked like an old map. Booths patched with gray duct tape and old gum. A faded jukebox leaned in the corner like a forgotten relic of good times that never quite came back after 2003. And there sat Thomas Tom Mallory, 75 and weathered, occupying his usual booth by the big picture window that offered a generous view of not much, just 2 lanes of morning traffic and a broken mailbox. He had come every Wednesday and Sunday since 2015. That was the year Margaret died. He hadn't skipped a single visit since the funeral. Just the usual. Black coffee. No cream, no sugar. The local paper, read cover to cover, including the obituaries, which he now scanned before the front page. And, above all, no small talk. The staff changed with the seasons. The faces blurred. Names forgotten. But the coffee? Always the same. Too hot when poured, too bitter by the second sip, and too familiar to complain about. That morning, something was different. A new waitress on the day shift. Probably early 20s. Definitely green. She wore black sneakers 2 sizes too big and a white name tag that said Emily, written in faded blue pen like someone had filled it out in a rush. Her brown hair was tied back into a practical ponytail that bounced when she walked. She moved with the kind of polite stiffness that told you she'd had exactly 2 days of training and wasn't eager to stand out, for good or bad. She approached Tom's table carefully, with the air of someone who'd been told that guy. Just refill the coffee. Don't ask questions. Good morning, sir. Coffee refill? He gave a slight nod, not lifting his eyes from the sports section. Dodgers won. Again. She poured, steady-handed despite the weight of being new, and offered a tentative smile before gliding over to a table of construction workers debating football. It was in that moment, that glance, that tilt of her body as she leaned away, that he saw it. The dog tag. Just a flash. A piece of worn silver glinting under the fluorescent ceiling. It dangled from a black cord, mostly hidden beneath her shirt, but not enough. Not from him. That shape. That swing. That sound. He knew it. The sight hit like shrapnel, small but sharp. His breath caught. A reflex from somewhere deeper than lungs. He told himself it was coincidence. 100,000 tags out there. Probably more. He took a long drink of his coffee, lukewarm, as usual, and forced the thought down with the bitterness. But when she returned again, something in him overruled habit. He looked up. Made eye contact. She paused, surprised by his sudden attention. Everything okay? She asked, the corner of her mouth twitching into concern. Tom hesitated for half a breath. Then pointed, not rudely, but directly. That tag, he said. May I ask, where'd you get it? The girl blinked, reaching reflexively to the dog tag, her fingers curling around it protectively. Oh, this? She lifted it halfway, then let it fall back softly against her chest. It was my uncle's. My mom gave it to me when I graduated. He served in Vietnam, but I never met him. He died over there. I just wear it because I guess it reminds her of him. She said he was the good one. She smiled at the last part, sad, but proud. Tom's expression didn't change, but something in his shoulders relaxed. What was his name? He asked, voice low. Calder, she said. Liam Calder. The name landed like a stone in water. Tom's fingers slowly curled into fists on the table. Liam. He remembered the letters Liam wrote home every week. The way he sketched pancake restaurants in his field notebook. How he talked about his sister Ellen as if she were the best part of him. And how, on one terrible day outside Da Nang, he had bled into Tom's lap and whispered, "Tell her I wasn't scared." Tom cleared his throat, suddenly aware his hands were shaking. "Miss, could you sit for a moment?" He gestured to the seat across from him. The question wasn't a command, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that presses down with memory. She looked uncertain but nodded, sliding into the booth opposite him. Tom leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "He was with me," he said. "When it happened." "What's your name, miss?" His voice came low, gravelly, like a wheel rolling over loose stone. The kind of voice that had once barked commands through the chaos of gunfire, but now only murmured questions into cracked diner booths. The young waitress straightened slightly, surprised. She smiled, not the forced, service industry grin, but something more real. More human. Jenna. Jenna Calder. Thomas Ward leaned back, studying her in silence. His gray eyes, dulled by years and dust, now glinted like metal under tension. He gestured faintly toward the tag around her neck. "That military identification tag. Yours personally?" She glanced down and brushed her fingers over the silver rectangle, a habit formed without awareness. "Not exactly. Family thing, really," she replied. "It was my uncle's. Served in Vietnam. I never met him, he died before I was born, but my mom, she gave it to me when I turned 18. Said it belonged to someone brave. Said it was part of our story." Thomas nodded with solemn understanding, then slowly turned back to his newspaper without another word. But the coffee in front of him remained untouched. The sports section blurred under his unsteady fingers. The jukebox in the corner, long since broken, gave off an occasional mechanical click, like a stubborn ghost trying to play a tune no one could remember. He didn't read another word. The rest of his breakfast, lukewarm eggs, dry toast, the faint smell of antiseptic cleanser, passed in a distracted fog. When he finally stood, his movements were slower than usual. He left a 20 beneath the cup, twice the bill. Without waiting for change, he made his way toward the door, nodding silently at Jenna as he passed. At home, in the small cedar-framed ranch on the edge of town, Thomas stepped into the narrow hallway and stared at the coat closet for a long while. The door creaked open with a reluctant sigh. From the top shelf, he pulled down a weathered shoebox, scuffed, taped, and marked with an old address in a handwriting that no longer existed in the world. The lid came off like opening a vault of memories too dangerous to visit without armor. Inside lay a folded American flag, carefully preserved under clear plastic. Next to it, a silver star wrapped in the letter that accompanied its delivery. 3 campaign ribbons. A bronze star. And a color photograph, faded at the edges. 6 young men in jungle fatigues, all smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Mud-streaked faces. Shoulders too tense for their age. And Thomas himself, barely 21, already world-weary, standing beside a shorter kid with a crooked grin and a sketchbook jammed into the chest pocket of his flak vest. Liam Calder. PFC. O positive. 1969. Dog tag, identical in shape and feel to the one Jenna wore. Thomas picked it up. The cold metal warmed slowly in his hand as memories broke their decades-long silence. Liam had been just 19, couldn't grow a beard to save his life. He sketched dogs, diners, and the view from his grandmother's porch in Maine. Talked endlessly about opening a barbecue joint when he got out. Said he'd call it Calder's Smokehouse, with brisket so tender it'd make a general cry. They were part of Ghost Team 6, a small recon unit that operated behind enemy lines along the mountainous edges near Quang Nam Province. Out there, trust was your only armor, and Thomas had taken the role of Big Brother without ever being asked. He taught Liam how to stay quiet, how to keep his boots dry, how to read the wind before it changed. But he hadn't taught him how not to die. It happened fast, ambush on a jungle trail they'd walked 3 times before. Liam took a hit to the chest before he could shout a warning. Thomas had pulled him into cover, hands soaked in blood before he even registered the screaming in his own throat. He remembered the way Liam's eyes searched his face, like looking for permission to leave. "Tell Mom I drew that recipe," he'd whispered. "Put it in my will. The ribs. She'll know." And then, silence. The weight of the tag felt disproportionate to its size. A few grams of etched metal, yet it carried entire lifetimes never lived. Thomas returned the tag to the box with reverence, then sat in his old recliner by the window, staring into the middle distance where memory and reality blurred. Some ghosts don't creak the floorboards. They don't rattle chains or slam doors. They just wait, in photos, in dog tags, in the corners of diners, until the right moment to return and demand acknowledgement. That night, Thomas skipped dinner. He took his sleeping pills at the usual time, though his body buzzed with memory like a tuning fork still vibrating after a distant strike. But sleep never came. Instead, he sat upright, staring at the dog tag on his coffee table. It wasn't the ghost of Liam Calder that haunted him. It was the question. Why her? Why now? And what was he supposed to do with the weight of unfinished promises pressing against his chest like jungle heat? He kept hearing them, sounds that didn't belong to suburbia or 2020's America. They belonged to the wet, claustrophobic jungles of Southeast Asia. Strange bird calls that mimicked laughter. The distant thump of artillery, like giants walking underground. The metallic chopping of helicopter blades tearing through humid air, and the bone-deep vibration that followed. But the sound that haunted Thomas Ward most was smaller, closer, the strained, wet breathing of lungs filling with blood. Liam Calder. The youngest in their 6-man recon unit. 19, freshly pulled from basic training, skin too smooth to hold a 5 o'clock shadow. Still learning how to shave without cutting himself, still sending home letters every Tuesday and Friday, folded with military neatness, sealed with hope. Thomas, despite being only 21, had automatically stepped into the role of older brother. He showed Liam how to move silently, how to ration water under jungle heat, how to sleep with one eye open and a finger resting near the safety catch. He taught him which trees concealed hornets, which mud patches were booby traps, and how to keep calm when you heard a twig snap in the wrong direction. In November 1969, during what should have been a routine recon sweep northwest of Da Nang, everything changed. They walked into an ambush. Well hidden, well coordinated, and terrifyingly effective. Heavy machine gun fire pinned them down within seconds. Grenades followed. Then the screaming started. Liam had been hit first, chest and lower abdomen, by razor-sharp shrapnel from an RPG blast that tore through the underbrush and sprayed them like death confetti. Thomas didn't hesitate. He dragged Liam behind a twisted root cluster, pressed both hands to the deepest wound, and shouted into the radio for medevac as bullets punched holes through the air inches above them. Liam had whispered the whole time. His voice gurgled, barely audible. "Tell my sister," he managed between gasps. "Wasn't scared. When it happened. Tell her. I wasn't scared." He bled out before the rescue chopper even crested the ridge. Weeks later, back on base and barely stitched together inside, Thomas had sat at a rickety desk in a supply tent and handwrote the hardest letter of his life. He poured into it everything Liam was, his humor, his decency, his dreams of opening a restaurant with his sister one day. He included his last words. It came back marked address unknown. No forwarding information. No explanation. Just a silent, rubber-stamped void where a grieving family should have been. The night before, Thomas barely slept. But the next morning, as the sun rose over his quiet cul-de-sac, he dressed, laced his boots with mechanical precision, and walked with deliberate resolve back to the diner off Route 19. Same booth. Same cracked vinyl seat. Same view of the world passing indifferently by. He waited. The bell above the door jingled as others came and went. But he watched the kitchen swing door, waiting for a ponytail and a silver tag. Finally, she appeared. Jenna Calder. Same gentle smile. Same trying not to be noticed grace. She approached with her coffee pot in hand. "Good morning again, sir." "Your usual?" He nodded. "Please." As she leaned to pour, the silver dog tag slipped out from beneath her shirt. It swung gently with her movement, an echo of history she didn't yet understand. Thomas reached up slowly and touched her wrist, not grabbing, just halting. His hand, liver-spotted and calloused, trembled faintly. "May I examine that identification tag?" She blinked in surprise, then nodded, slightly confused. He lifted the tag between his fingers. Turned it over with a reverence usually reserved for sacred relics. The engraving caught the light. Calder, Liam A. OPOS. 1969. His voice cracked. Years of silence ruptured. "You mentioned he was your uncle?" Jenna nodded. "My mother's younger brother. He died in Vietnam when she was still in high school. She doesn't talk about it much. Just gave me the tag on my 18th birthday. Said he would have liked you. That was it." Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. Not to hide emotion, but to steady it. He handed the tag back gently, like returning something fragile. "I served with him," he said softly. Jenna's eyes widened. "You knew Liam?" Thomas nodded. "I was there when his voice faltered." He sat straighter, took a breath. "When it happened, he wasn't afraid. He was brave. And he thought about her, your mother, right until the end." Jenna didn't speak. She lowered the coffee pot to the table and sat across from him without asking. Outside, traffic passed like it always had. But something inside the diner, between those two people, shifted. "You sent a letter?" Jenna asked. "I did." Thomas stared down at the table. "It came back. Address unknown. I thought maybe no one wanted to hear it. Or, maybe it was too much." Jenna shook her head. "She would have wanted to know. She's never let it go. She always kept his senior photo on the mantle. Said he was her best friend." Thomas swallowed hard, emotion building like pressure in his chest. Jenna reached into her pocket and took out the tag again. She set it on the table between them. "Maybe you're supposed to give it back properly this time," she said gently. "We don't know many details about his service," Jenna said quietly, her eyes drifting toward the floor. She's never been comfortable discussing it. Thomas Ward gently pressed the dog tag back against the fabric of her blouse. His fingers trembled visibly, not from weakness, but from the sudden collision of memory and meaning. His hand lingered just long enough for the cool metal to rest in place over her heart. "He was with me," he said, barely more than a whisper. Then he added, more slowly, like coaxing truth from decades of silence. "When he died." Jenna's eyes widened. She didn't blink. Then, without hesitation, she pulled the empty chair across from him and sat down, ignoring the impatient ring of the service bell 2 tables over. "What do you remember about him?" she asked, her voice taut with urgency, her body leaning forward as if bracing against a gust of emotion. Thomas looked out the diner window for a moment. The view hadn't changed, just 2 pump islands at the shuttered gas station, and a crooked for-lease sign in the tire shop window. But inside him, the landscape had shifted entirely. "Everything," he answered. Then he laughed softly, a worn-out sound shaped by sorrow. "He was scared. Of course he was. But he still made jokes. Said the first thing he'd do when he got home was open a diner. Pancakes all day, breakfast for dinner, that kind of thing. He paused. The smell of overcooked bacon and weak coffee seemed to retreat as the moment deepened. Right before he died, Thomas continued, eyes glassy, he made me promise. Said, tell my sister I wasn't scared. Not when it happened. Jenna reached across the table and placed her hand gently over his. Her fingers were warm, young, alive, firm whereas were weathered and trembling. She needs to hear that, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. All these years, she's never stopped missing him. But she doesn't talk about it. Like if she opens that door, everything else will come crashing through. Thomas nodded, tears pooling but refusing to fall. He knew. He understood exactly the weight of that kind of silence. This encounter, born from a coincidence in a necklace, wasn't coincidence at all. It was something else. A summoning. A promise, long buried, finally given shape again. Jenna squeezed his hand. Let's give her that message. A week passed. Thomas returned to the diner every day, even on days that weren't part of his usual routine. But Jenna never came back. He started assuming the worst, maybe the conversation had been too much, maybe she'd quit. Or maybe she'd just moved on with life. The younger generation didn't often linger in grief not their own. But then, the following Sunday, the bell over the door rang, and she entered. Not in uniform. Not with the clatter of coffee mugs or the practiced ease of table service. She wore jeans, a burgundy coat, and no apron. And she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a woman in her late 60s. Steel gray hair pulled into a tight, elegant twist. Sharp cheekbones. Military posture without the military. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, only a simple black coat and a small pendant that looked like a pressed wildflower encased in glass. Her eyes scanned the room not in curiosity, but calculation. She wasn't here to chat. She was here to face something. Thomas stood instinctively as they approached. Mrs. Calder, he said, offering a respectful nod. She returned it, barely. No smile. Just a quiet acknowledgement, the kind people give at gravesides. Jenna held a manila envelope in both hands as if carrying something sacred. She passed it to Thomas with deliberate care. She wants to hear what you remember, Jenna said softly, but she wants to see something first. Thomas's brows furrowed. He opened the envelope slowly, careful not to tear anything. What lay inside made him stiffen. A sealed letter. Yellowed, creased. Addressed in his own hand. His breath hitched as he recognized it instantly. His 1969 letter. The letter. Unopened. Unread. Across the front were 5 distinct postmarks and stamps. Return to sender. No forwarding address available. Undeliverable as addressed. And finally, scrawled in blue ink, likely by a postmaster long gone. Calder family moved. Destination unknown. He stared at it like it had emerged from a dream. The woman across from him, Ellen Calder, reached slowly into her own coat pocket and removed a folded handkerchief. Her fingers, though steady, fidgeted. I found it in my mother's keepsake box after she passed, she said for the first time, her voice low and precise. She must have gotten it back, somehow. But never opened it. I didn't either. I couldn't. Not until now. Thomas looked up. I wrote it for you. I didn't know where you'd gone. We left after he died, Ellen replied. My parents couldn't handle the memories. We moved to Ohio. They never told anyone. They just shut it all out. The silence between them felt like its own kind of battlefield. Not hostile, but heavy with what could have been said years ago, but wasn't. Then, slowly, Ellen reached across the table, the same gesture her daughter had made the week prior. Read it to me, she said. Thomas nodded, his throat thickening. He slid his finger under the old envelope's flap, peeled it open with a care that bordered on reverence, and unfolded the letter he had written 54 years ago under the flickering light of a military tent. And then he began to read. His voice, shaking but clear, carried the words of a 21-year-old who had watched a brother fall, who had held on to his final request like a compass in a world that had lost its direction. "I kept the original," Thomas said quietly. "All these years. I hoped one day I'd find the right address." Ellen Calder lowered herself into the seat across from him. Her spine was straight, but her expression softened, grief gently loosening its grip. She touched the edge of the unopened envelope. "Tell me the truth, Mr. Ward," she said, eyes locked on his. "Was he suffering?" Thomas looked down at the letter between them. "Yes," he said finally. "The wounds were bad. But he wasn't scared. He asked about you. He said, 'Tell her I wasn't afraid. Tell her I was proud.'" Ellen's eyes shimmered. "He really talked about pancakes?" she asked, half laughing through the catch in her voice. Thomas smiled. "Wouldn't shut up about them. Said we'd open a diner, Beatles-themed breakfast menu. Here comes the hash, SGT, pepper scramble. He had it all planned. That broke her." She covered her mouth as sobs came, deep and shaking, like a dam breaking after decades of silence. Jenna moved beside her mother and laid a gentle hand on her back. The diner hushed around them, as if the space itself understood the moment. Thomas leaned forward and shared more, how Liam hummed cleaning his rifle, drew cartoons of the unit, wrote Ellen every week but always rewrote drafts. They talked for over an hour, piecing together a life lost but never forgotten. When Ellen reached for her coat, Thomas pulled out a worn cloth pouch. Inside, a second dog tag, scuffed but intact. Liam A. Calder. OPOS. Presbyterian. 1969. He laid it in Jenna's hand. He'd want this returned to his family. Jenna clutched it instinctively, reverently. Ellen reached forward and hugged Thomas. "Thank you," she whispered. "For keeping him alive in memory. I thought he'd been forgotten." Thomas shook his head. No one who served with Liam could ever forget him. Ellen took out a small black notebook. "Would you visit his grave with us?" Thomas didn't hesitate. "I'd be honored."